I'm going to have a new computer potentially next week, so we had to have technical issues on the last rig, the last big performance of my old computer. It had to cause some technical issues for its big finale ending. But we are here. We're gonna try to keep this condensed and efficient for you guys as well. Donnie, how you doing? Gov, how you doing? Let's jump right in here. Do you guys have any initial thoughts?
And initial thoughts are really that was a great game between Kansas City and the Cincinnati.
It really was a good. I can't believe they didn't flex that into the night game over the Indy Dallas game. As good as Dallas looks, it's still Dallas. Like, I'm not a big fan of them, and they can do whatever, but love that Kansas City Cincinnati game. And wow, Raiders, like they legitimately just use their two dudes all the freaking time. I love it.
Yeah. You know how we thought, like, in the first couple of weeks that how the Seahawks are, and they are to that extent and some level. The Raiders have taken that to the extreme. Think of them both as professional wrestling circuits. Well, the Raiders just went ECW, Extreme Rules style. They only use Jacobs and Adams, and I was all over it in this lineup. I had Allen and Adams cooking. This is my best lineup. This is the Pat Mayo Listeners League, and I wanted to show this for a couple different reasons. We always talk about diversifying our portfolios. Using, I always say use, head to head, use the 100-man, use different prop bets. If you can find a rake-free contest, they're great. You have to pay a bit more up front usually. They're not the cheapest, but there's no operation fee. And so if you feel confident, it's a great way. And we were very profitable this week. So I'm gonna be gifting a rake-free contest for us for our lineup show builder. We'll either jump into, I think, either Pat Mayo's or Pat Overzet's or Al Zeidenfeld's rake-free contest, just because I gotta pay it forward. When we start to see process decisions start being made, like even though this wasn't the lineup we built on streaming, but like I say, it's not always the lineup we put in. It's the theory, and a lot of these players were guys that we talked about. Gov talked about the Raiders being very condensed in our lineup builder show, and I just felt like Adams was a perfect leverage off of that because you knew the ball was going there. Without Mike Evans, without Mike Williams, you knew Keenan Allen was going to get healthier and have a blow-up week. This lineup actually got very unlucky in the sense Hayden Hurst had 2 catches in the first quarter, and I think a minute left in the first quarter, he went out with the injury and never returned.
Yeah, that was very. Injuries happen though. Couple injuries this week that Kenneth Walker in another game was good. There were a lot of injuries that sort of. It happens though in football. It's a very violent sport, so injuries will happen.
Who knows, Donnie, if this lineup even catches, even though I had an injury with Hayden Hurst because Walker was off to a start. And maybe I drop out of the cash line if Walker gets 30, So it's one of those catch-22 things. You have to take the good with the bad. And so I want to show you this lineup because it was the most profitable. And then we'll get on to another lineup. And just show you how some weeks we want a middle. And this week we made profit in almost every lineup we made. And it wasn't, groundbreaking profit. It wasn't like first place profit, but like that build for next week. And really in our lineup builder show, we're not just building 1 week lineups. We're building for the conundrum, for the big moments. And the Super Bowl has some awesome contests. The playoffs have some awesome contests. So you don't have to win every week in terms of getting first place, even though that should be the goal for some people. But I think that's also important to know is like know why you're playing. Because there are different reasons. You can play for entertainment, you can play to be a professional. And so, Donnie, what do you find most fun about building a lineup? And then as you watch the games, what do you find? Does it change?
I mean, honestly, most of my lineups, I've never built a lineup alone. I don't really plan on building a lineup alone. I enjoy, having the conversations going into the games. I think it just keeps me more engaged late in the games, or on like what feels like a more meaningless drive in the second quarter, where it's not going to make me get up and go grab a snack or something.
See, and I can see that, and that's a good, like again, like
I would agree.
when me and Logan were talking about before the season. You got to know why you want to play DFS, and just keep that in mind. If you're playing it for fun, you're playing it as a lottery ticket. You don't care if you're throwing in a few bucks. You're good. Build some good, solid lineups. I know that it's clearly doable, even with the mistakes that can happen, even with the snowflakes from injury or whatever. There was good like this lineup kind of looks a little too chalky, but then when you realize you are probably the only person in this tournament playing Mike Boone, everything's fine. Everything's fine. You could have played a cash lineup with Mike Boone over Zonovan Knight and a different defense and just been fine.
I knew I could get different two ways because I knew Trevor Lawrence was going to be high owned, and I knew Knight was going to be high owned. And I like Boone's potential because I remember him playing with the Vikings, and I remember him being like a big bowling ball that could catch the ball. Similar to Anderson, who used to play for the Rams. CJ Anderson, I believe was his name. Where it's like he looks like a big body, but he actually has soft hands. And that's Boone. Where I thought if the Jets got behind, they would Ty Johnson more. That ended up being wrong, but I don't think the idea was wrong. And then the Lions defense again, Trevor Lawrence and high owned. Say what?
I was agreeing with you. I don't think it was wrong either.
Yeah. So again, that's what you want. Though you want to take some stands. So I don't care so much about hot water, cold water, snow, flames. I just want the lineup to make sense, and I thought this lineup made some sense.
Yep.
Donnie, you have any thoughts about this lineup, or any thoughts really in general?
I mean, the guys that failed, like in a sense, were Sky Moore and Mike Boone, and they were so cheap.
They were literally minimum salary,
right?
At their position.
Right. I mean, it was such a cheap thing that it wasn't huge, especially when you got on Amon or you get on Devontae. P. Ryan had a good game without Mixon being there.
Keenan got saved by that late touchdown.
He did, and that's where the luck comes in. But okay, so, and I'm glad you mentioned that point, Donnie, because I think that's a good point. So don't even use Adam's name. I guess at this point we would have to just make a point, but try to think of the player itself. Don't think of Adams. If I don't play Boone and I play Knight, I'm probably playing just of a correlation. And Jefferson did not do well. He had less than 20 points less than Adams did. So even if I would have played Knight, I don't think I really get much advantage there. In fact, I might get less points. So you can't always just look at the ice cube of one player. It's the joint effort of what it does. It's the building blocks of what it does for your lineup. And so sometimes when you're so convicted on a play, you got to kind of roll with it. Maybe I don't play Keenan Allen, but that made sense with the and 40, and obviously I'm fading Trevor Lawrence, and kind of hoping that Jags have a bad game because I think it's possible the Lions defense would look better in recent. But I'm still not stupid to think that game's not going to score a lot of points. So of course I'm going to bring it back with the chalky Amon St. Brown. Let's transition over to our lineup really quickly, and then I want to hit on some key topics, and then we'll get out of here. Like I said, we want to keep this condensed and informative more than we want to just talk for the sake of talking. I thought this lineup was better than mine and just got very unlucky in different ways. And like what's funny is you can see the process plays because they're a lot the same. You know, we both played Allen. You know, I played Mahomes. In this lineup, we played Joe Burrow. Like, the idea was there.
And the points weren't very much different either.
Yeah.
They're very similar points.
Well, that's big.
Yeah, like the pivot, like the few pivots we made were pretty solid. And again, we got unlucky with like Sky Moore unlucky, Boone unlucky. Chase did better than Hurst, but Hawkinson didn't do nearly as good as Adams.
Right.
And then I forget and Burrow did outplay Mahomes. But like for the most part, like, yeah, we were 10 points back, and that was basically Adams having 40. What covers that?
Right. And to go back to the last lineup where I had the Lions defense, I don't necessarily think that was like a lights out performance by the Lions defense. Zay Jones, for example, dropped 2 touchdowns in that game. Like one was a nice breakup, but he could have had it. The other one was a wide open drop on third down where he could have easily walked in. I could have walked in with a manual wheelchair, I believe, if I just hang on to the ball. Like that's how open he was. So little things like that are going to change the lineup, you know. Who knows if Sky Moore, you know, if the Chiefs are able to score more, but for some reason they just didn't, and the Bengals defense really showed out. So like, I'm not even blaming Sky Moore. I think the opportunity was there, and I guess that's the larger point. Is the opportunity of these lineups were very similar, and I think we're on the right play. And I'll take opportunity over results any time of the week.
Do we know how many targets Sky Moore got that game? Was it none? Was there a couple to him? Just out of curiosity.
I'd have to look exactly. Give me 1 second.
I want to say 4, but yeah, I'm going
And
to
that's
say
the thing.
4
He hits
without
value.
looking at any
He catches
statistical numbers.
3 of those.
Yeah.
Like
his 1.2 was on a run. So it was a jet sweep near the red zone. So even with that, he could have scored a touchdown and hit value. Like at 3K, you don't understand, like maybe we don't play a Joe Burrow stack, or we play it differently if we don't have Sky Moore's value. So like you can't always look at the snowflake and say I made a mistake here, you know. I think at one point, just like to give Gov a bit more of a buffer here, at one point I believe Cousins missed Hawkinson wide open in the end zone as well. If that 7 turns into 14, who knows? You know, or maybe Hawkinson gets hurt, you know, catches the touchdown, gets 14, but gets hurt for the remainder of the season, which messes us up long term as we look to play him in a revenge game next week. So like, that's the thing about daily too, is like we can always look at the day, even though it is daily sport, you can't always look at the result and be like, well, since you know, we just have to react, and sometimes it's not going to work.
Wow, for some reason,
a guy like DeAndre Swift was getting healthy.
There we go.
Oh, it's fine, but you got it.
Almost. It's finally bringing it up.
I was just going to say, a guy like DeAndre Swift, for example, had been getting healthier for the last 3 weeks. And so I knew eventually, within probably a 4-week span, he was going to have a big week because his role kept increasing, right? And it ended up being this week. And so now you have to evaluate, is that role going to continue to expand? Is it the same? Or was it the Jacksonville Jaguars' inability at linebacker? Because Dan Campbell also talked about how Jared Goff doesn't usually throw for over 300 yards, but in that game, they wanted to attack the Jags through the air. So you take each game as its own piece, but also look forward in a way, if that makes sense, for some forward progress. How about now, Gov? Do you got it?
For some reason, it is not bringing. It keeps rerouting me to the damn playoff game whenever I try to look at stats for this team. Like even when I click on the game from yesterday, it immediately brings up the fucking January 30th, 2022. It's like I don't need like it bring or the
apparently sky's the limit, man. Yeah, Donnie, you have to look it up on your own, buddy. That's what they're saying. Sky's the limit. You don't get to know. I guess they're forecasting the Chiefs are going to make the playoffs. I guess that's the only statistic we can take from that. So let me do this with you guys so we can do some forecasting for.
I found it.
There you go.
It was 0 targets, but he played 23 snaps, which is about what he's been averaging throughout the season, and he's been getting targets off of that.
And he got 1 rush attempt. Okay, yeah.
So he was on the field enough to get the targets.
Yeah, they just didn't use him that much. Kelsey didn't get used that much. It was weird.
The thing, too, is like I mean, like, that's where the luck factor comes in because a guy like Jameson Williams, who we knew would be limited, saw a red zone target. Sky Moore doesn't see any red zone targets, but Williams was only on the field for 8 snaps. So sometimes we're just at the mercy of, luck, and we have as well. There's a lot of process and strategy daily, and I wouldn't call it a lottery ticket, but we have to embrace the gamble when it's there. Speaking of embracing the gamble, let's look at a different way to review this slate while also forecasting for next week. Donnie, what do you think was the most important fantasy or real life element that impacted the playoffs this week?
See, I do not have an answer to that off the top of my head.
For me, I believe it was the 49ers. Do you have an answer, Gov?
I don't.
Because even if Jimmy is healthy, I talked about this before. Like, I used to coach basketball. When you talk about legs and feet and movement, it's one of those things that even if you have come back from an injury and you not needing surgery, like Jimmy apparently doesn't need surgery, if you don't trust that leg, if you don't trust that wheel, it's hard to drive the car. So even if he doesn't need surgery, if he's thinking about it too much and not reacting, especially at such a pivotal position like quarterback, they might be better with Chris Pretty out there, to be honest. We're going to have to see how Jimmy looks because, like, again, it's almost like a basketball player who knows talent. If he doesn't trust that leg to go off of, get that layup, and he's apprehensive, and just a momentary lap could be the difference between the interception over the middle for pick 6. And so I'm still worried about the Jimmy G thing. Overall, I didn't see anything from Tampa as well. I would mention that I don't think they're a playoff team. I actually think Gov's Panthers probably showed the most promise by being on a bye week and then having Sam come back the previous week. I think they have the momentum similar to the Lions, where it's like maybe they don't get in, but they have, they have some kind of confidence. They have some kind of mojo building where it's like the injuries just keep piling up for Tampa.
Well, what's interesting for the 49ers is next week they play the Bucs, which the Bucs have looked awful. We don't really know what the Niners will look like with Purdy out for a whole game. but you'd assume the Bucks would win that. But considering how they've played, it's not out of question that the Niners can win. Then they have the Seahawks, which potentially is for the division that week. And then the Commanders, which is another big playoff game where they're going to be fighting for tiebreakers. So this upcoming stretch for the 49ers is huge for the season.
Yeah, they do need to come out of this pretty solidly. Or
2-1 minimum, I think. I mean, 1-2 really puts them in a hole, especially if one of those losses come to Seattle.
I think they could go 1-2 as long as they beat Seattle,
which is also possible.
I could see them going 3-0 and 0-3.
Some of these,
yeah, maybe.
I mean, some of these teams have easy schedules too. The Vikings have an easier schedule, and I mean, and so do the Lions have a pretty easy schedule when you look at it because they play the Packers in Week 17, but it looks like Jordan Love might be the guy that saw Aaron Rodgers. So, like, I guess that'd be Donnie here because I'm curious to see what he thinks. Hasn't played fantasy sports under this umbrella, and we have. But as the season goes on, and we see teams get eliminated, like Matthew Stafford goes to IR and stuff like that, how does that impact your lineup building decisions? Are you only looking to build players with playoff contentions?
I think it depends week to week, but I think a game that's interesting that might not be on everybody's radar next week, to not like go on and fully attack, but at least get pieces of, is the Lions-Vikings. There are a lot of players. Right. I could see this game being low scoring, honestly, but I expect the stars to show out. I expect Hawkinson to get a couple of plays. I expect Amon-Ra to get a little bit. Swift is probably going to have a couple catches.
Well, let's talk about that from a review standpoint, but we also felt forward, Donnie, and I'll get back to that point with Gov here in a minute. So because we saw the Lions put up 3 points, do you think their ownership's going to spike to a level that's uncomfortable, or do you think like it's good chalk, quote unquote? Like, how do you apply that to a DraftKings mindset as we look to build for next week? Or maybe you don't put any stock in it at all. I'm just curious, kind of your mindset.
Not a lot of stock in it.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, the only guy that worries me is I just feel like St. Brown's not going to be able to keep up this level of production because and it's nothing to do with him. He's still really talented. But I just feel like DJ Shark's getting healthier, Williams is getting healthier, and so is Swift. So I think St. Brown could have a good real-life game, but I don't think we should expect 10 to 11 targets every week. I don't think it's that consistent.
It's going to be close, but if that is his worry, is that there are enough weapons for him to not get that volume.
Well, my thing is, I think they have to. The Lions have to try and get Jameson Williams somewhat involved soon.
Most teams take 2 to 3 weeks to try to involve a guy. Like last week, he got a little bit of route running to sort of like get him. This is
week 2. I want to see it in the next 3 games, though. And
next week or two, if they're going to use him, he needs to start getting some targets.
I think it should be on our radar thinking about it, but
I will be playing him, so whether you guys are comfortable playing him or not, we can.
If he's around 4,500, that's the price range I'd like to see him at.
I want him a little cheaper than that right now. Like he was 47, and I thought that was unplayable for a first game.
Right, but I could see him at 45. I mean, what do you 43? 43. There you go. Well, now we're talking.
That's a solid extra, like low end wide receiver play.
Just a throw thing out there. Him and Hawkinson as a skinny stack.
Yeah, like
that's all I'm saying with the Detroit.
That's where I go now. Yeah. And it's because Jeff did so well on wide receivers. I would either go with Williams or Thielen because Thielen usually does really the big body receivers, and our other corner opposite of Jeff Okudah is Jerry Jacobs. But sometimes real football though gets in the way. Like we worry about matchups too much. So I know you're not a big narrative guy, so this would be a fun topic for you to kind of forecast. I asked before, but do you stay away from non-playoff teams? And then as we get closer to incentive time, how does that influence your lineup builds? Because I feel like these are good reflective points that we can build on in the coming weeks and give some people some evergreen content.
Most of the time, I don't worry about incentives till like the last two weeks of the season, really, because that's when it's really like, okay, these are when guys actually need to take an uptick in stuff, or else they're not going to hit their things. And then the guys who deserve to get that uptick to try to hit their bonus. Usually, it's those, like, most of the time you can tell. And then yes, those guys, they're not going to project with that in mind. But that they're probably good for a 70th percentile than a 50th percentile game.
But
and you just gotta have to account for that.
If you see Kelsey needing 5 catches for like $1 million, the Chiefs are going to get him 5 catches because they've already clinched.
Exactly. But you don't know that in week, like, I'm not going to start doing that in week 14, 15, 16.
Right.
That's a week 17, week 18. Last 2 weeks, this guy needs 100 yards. This guy needs 6 catches. Something like that. Maybe it's a little farther. Like maybe it's like 2 weeks left. This guy needs 185 yards to bonus. Well, I think they can get him 90 and 90. Or they'll try to get him like 110 so that he only has to get like 60 next week or something. So like that would be something where I might play that guy 2 straight weeks, knowing that he's going to try to have, if he doesn't have 100 yards the first game, he's going to try for it the second game to get his bonus. But like those are the things you watch out for the last 2 weeks.
Are there certain teams that you'd avoid, like with an incentive like that in mind? Is it teams that are fighting for a playoff spot in the last week?
No, because if I believe the player deserves the incentive, so probably does the team, and they're going to like try to get it to him in an optimal way. But most of the time, the teams that are chasing that stuff are either well out of the playoffs or securely in. Most of the time, the fringe teams, no one's had a season where they're right on the edge of a bonus.
Well, just an example. Like last year, the Raiders and Chargers needed to win and get in week 18. If Keenan Allen needed 6 catches, is that something you avoid and go to somewhere else? Or Keenan Allen with the incentive and it being such a game of such big stature?
See, and that's one of those scenarios where it's like, if the Chargers are getting in, they're going to run their offense. And their offense is going to get Keenan Allen 6 catches, or else they're not getting in. Because, like, the way our offense ran, if Keenan Allen doesn't catch 6 balls, they're not doing anything and getting in the playoffs. So, like, that one's one where, like, those two sort of coincide. To win this game, our offense needs to work well. Our offense gives Keenan Allen 10 targets a game. He should easily catch 6 balls.
Yeah.
Now, if there was a scenario where Keenan Allen needed like 12 catches, that's probably not happening in a must-win game. Now, he's at 8 catches in the third quarter. Wheels might start turning. You have the game locked up. You're up 20. You're up 2 touchdowns, and he still needs 4 catches. He might not rest with the starters. That kind of stuff can still happen. But like it's more like an afterthought in the back of my mind. Unless it's something that I know is doable and should be done. But again, it's most part like the way the Chargers run their offense, you would expect that with Keenan.
Really quick with
If I needed the tight end to get 6 catches, I'm not thinking they're chasing that.
right. No, relationship does matter, and Keenan and Herbert have that chemistry, and that's where the kind of tiebreaker and knowing these like football narratives does help a little bit. Like I do agree with Gov that we shouldn't pay attention to narratives like week 1 to 17. Like they're not gospel, but they do matter to some extent. I would say what I like about the ending of the season that we haven't spoke about yet as a forecast is with the flexing ability, with these people being able to flex games later. I mean, Fox's game of the week being PMR leverage. I think these moments are where you can really take advantage. Because like I've mentioned many times, and some of you guys are new, so I'll say it again, people want to see themselves winning in contests. So I don't care what it is, you always have lower ownership in the later games. Patrick Mahomes was only 9% owned this week. Now, I know he's expensive, but he was only 9% owned. Jalen Hurts, way more higher owned, but basically the same price. Because people want to see themselves winning earlier on. That's my personal belief. There are different theories on why that happens, but that's one of mine. And so, like later on, as these playoff games have more playoff implications, I do think there is some advantage to loading up on the PMR guide. With that being said, I don't know if we have that much more to say. I did have a clip from our man Al Zeidenfeld, who I kind of want to roll that clip at the beginning of our lineup builder show on Friday or Saturday, because I do think it will put us in. Sometimes we don't give enough thought to it. Do you guys have any fun, any kind of pillar concepts, any kind of ideas that you wanted to throw spaghetti at the wall for how to build a lineup that maybe we could forecast for the people as like a fun last exercise?
I honestly haven't even thought about next week yet.
I think I kind of spoiled my pillar already, where I want to get at least some pieces of that Lions game coming up.
I have one. So I was thinking that we'll have the pillar lineup like we do, but maybe for our secondary lineup as a concept, because I really did like that concept lineup, we try to build a lineup that has, and this would include running backs and wide receivers, where we need at least 9 targets for every position, including backs. Could we do it? I don't even know if it's possible, but these are kind of the theory that I like to throw early in the week, and then as I'm building my blocks, as I'm thinking about lineups, not even building them, just thinking about them. Is it possible? And then what would it look like? So that would be some forecasting we can do. I enjoyed this recap show. Our lineup show has been fantastic. That's the one that goes a bit longer. We've been having a lot of fun with that. Any last little tidbits? Any news come through while we've been on?
No news so far.
Baker Mayfield makes no difference to the Rams. The only
That's
thing I'll say about that is I'm glad that Matthew Stafford is shut down, because his health to me matters more than anything. So with that being said, thanks God for joining me. Good luck in basketball, and always diversify your portfolios. Play different things, but don't spend more than you got, and be smart with your money. As always, have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Not everybody.